Good morning. Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Here are today's top stories. House investigators plan to call President Biden to testify at an impeachment inquiry hearing. We have takeaways from testimony of Hunter Biden's former business associates and the White House reaction.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken travels to Saudi Arabia and Egypt to work on a ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addresses Republican senators. What he said.
President Biden continued his campaign in Arizona yesterday while making a big announcement on funding for semiconductor chips.
A Texas immigration law is blocked again by a federal appeals court just hours after the Supreme Court cleared the way for it to be enforced. We take a look at the legal back and forth with a former immigration judge.
Crimes against humanity. U.S. officials investigating forced organ harvesting in China. Hear what witnesses had to say and what U.S. states are doing about it.
Federal Reserve officials signaled yesterday they still expect to cut their key interest rate 3 times in 2024, fueling a rally on Wall Street. NTD's Don Ma has the details.
And cherry blossoms blooming in the nation's capital, but they won't be around for long. Some of those trees will soon say goodbye.
This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters, here are Evelyn Lee and Kevin Hogan.
Welcome to NTD.
Welcome, everyone. Today is Thursday, March 21st.
Yeah, and in the Middle East, at Al-Shifa Hospital, hundreds are believed to still be trapped there, and there are a lot of people fleeing the area.
Right, fighting still ongoing, but IDF also saying that they have found more weapons facilities, and apparently they were able to detain a senior Hamas operative there. And this is our top news this morning. The Israeli military reported today that it killed more than 50 Palestinian terrorists during the past day's fighting around Shifa Hospital in the Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire in Gaza continue. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the port city of Jeddah on Wednesday. The two discussed efforts to reach a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. On Thursday, Blinken is scheduled to meet in Cairo with the foreign ministers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Jordan, as well as a top official from the UAE and a Palestinian representative. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed Republican senators on Wednesday by video link. Senator John Barrasso says they got an update on the war, the release of hostages, and the efforts to defeat Hamas.
We told him Israel has every right to defend themselves, and he said that's exactly what they continue to do.
The address by Netanyahu comes nearly a week after Senate Leader Chuck Schumer gave a speech branding the Israeli leader an obstacle to peace.
Chuck Schumer's attacks on Netanyahu and the government of Israel is an attack upon a democracy.
Netanyahu has rebuffed a plea from President Biden to call off plans for a ground assault of Rafah, a city on the southern edge of Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister gave a televised address on Wednesday that preparations were underway for the invasion of the city.
I want you to know that I have already approved the IDF's operational plan, and soon we will also approve the plan to evacuate the civilian population from the battle zones.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says he is considering inviting Netanyahu to address Congress.
I think it's very important for us to show solidarity and support with Israel right now in their time of great struggle.
An invitation to address a joint session of Congress would require buy-in from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. The consideration of having Netanyahu also comes at a time when additional military aid to Israel appears stalled on Capitol Hill. The House passed a standalone military aid bill to Israel in November, but the Senate did not advance it, reportedly because the House bill offset the cost with cuts to the IRS. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And more Americans evacuated Haiti yesterday as the country sinks into chaos, rampant gang violence, and political instability.
Florida's Department of Emergency Management evacuated 14 Florida residents, chartering a plane to fly them to Orlando.
Governor Ron DeSantis says it will likely be the first of many flights to evacuate Florida residents. He says teams in Haiti are on the ground helping people get to departure points safely.
Officials say around 360 Floridians are still in Haiti. The State Department says around 1,600 Americans have reached out from Haiti to explore options.
A State Department spokesman said the U.S. is organizing government-chartered helicopter flights to evacuate Americans.
Armed gangs have been stepping up attacks on government infrastructure, including police stations. Gangs have choked off the food, fuel, and water supplies and blocked the city's port and roads. Many residents are sheltering in their homes.
President Biden announced today his administration is canceling another $6 billion in student loans.
The latest group includes 78,000 public service workers, including teachers, nurses, firefighters, and more.
This group qualifies under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program created in 2007 to forgive student debt for those going into public service.
The latest move brings the Biden administration's total student debt cancellation to $144 billion for about 4 million Americans.
An additional 380,000 borrowers who may be eligible for debt relief within the next 1 or 2 years will also be getting emails from Biden.
Biden is seeking re-election in November and needs the youth vote to help him win. Critics have accused the president of trying to buy votes with debt cancellation.
A House panel investigating allegations of influence peddling is planning to invite President Biden to testify as it winds up its probe.
House Oversight Chair James Comer says Americans need to hear from the president himself. He says that way, President Biden can explain why his family received tens of millions of dollars from foreign companies with his assistance. 2 of Hunter Biden's former business associates testified yesterday. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has takeaways from the hearing and the White House response.
Let the record show that the witnesses...
Hunter Biden's former business associates Tony Bobulinski and Jason Galanis testified Wednesday as part of the House impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Both said Joe Biden had been involved in their past business dealings. Galanis is serving a 15-year sentence on fraud charges and testified from prison. He says the aim was to make billions using the Biden family name in foreign business dealings. He testified Hunter Biden put his then vice president father on speakerphone with a Russian oligarch and her husband in 2014 and leveraged the family name with Chinese businessman Henry Chao. He testified Chao, chairman of Chinese Communist Party-linked Harvest Fund Management, was seeking partnership to gain political access in the U.S. and around the world. Galanis says prosecutors were uninterested in evidence he had of Hunter Biden's crimes and believes the reason was political.
I believe I've been a victim of a pattern of retribution by the Department of Justice. I believe I'm putting myself at grave risk within the BOP for providing information on these matters concerning the president and his son.
Galanis also testified he was sexually abused by a member of the prison staff at FPC Pensacola last year.
He persisted in sexually harassing me for many months thereafter. I had hoped to receive home confinement, which would remove me from danger.
Bobulinski started off by accusing Representatives Jamie Raskin and Dan Goldman of lying.
We keep hearing from certain corners that our democracy is at risk and democracy is on the ballot in 24. Yet the same people preaching this mantra know better. They continue to lie directly to the American people without hesitation and remorse.
He alleged Hunter Biden and James Biden had perjured themselves during deposition. Democrats called convicted businessman Lev Parnas to testify, an associate of Rudy Giuliani.
I will invite President Biden.
House Oversight Chair James Comer says he will invite President Biden to testify in the coming days. He's also considering ethics-related bills to target influence peddling or foreign lobbying among officials. The panel will issue a final report with recommendations once the inquiry has concluded. The White House says Republicans need to move on and focus on other issues. White House spokesman Ian Sams called it a sad stunt and told Comer to call it a day, pal. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party's forced organ harvesting of innocent people. That was the topic of a panel discussion yesterday on Capitol Hill.
This as Utah became the latest state to outlaw insurance coverage for organ transplant surgeries in China and other countries known for forced organ harvesting. NTD's Jack Bradley has the story.
Addressing the Chinese Communist Party's forced organ harvesting of Chinese people. The Congressional Executive Commission on China addressing one of China's darkest secrets, the non-consensual forced organ harvesting of religious believers like practitioners of Falun Gong.
We continue to build the case against the Chinese Communist Party that they are exploiting young men and women, average age 28, thousands of them every single year who are killed to get their organs. Many are Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, other political and religious prisoners.
This is horrifying, and it should horrify anyone, whether you're here in the United States or back in China. It is truly the wholesale rounding up of individuals of a persecuted class so that they can make, as we heard today, potentially millions of dollars off of organs harvested.
The panel discussed how the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting was specifically designed to suppress Falun Gong. Falun Gong, or Falun Dafa, is a spiritual practice based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. In 1999, there were reportedly 100 million people practicing in China, a number that surpasses the membership of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese regime launched its persecution that year and targeted Falun Gong practitioners for organ harvesting because they maintain a healthy lifestyle and don't drink or smoke.
What you have is this massive transplant infrastructure hand in hand with the incarceration of Falun Gong, which is almost 2 million at one point, very briefly in 2001. And then it kind of slows down to about 1 million to 500,000 at any given time. In every province in China, you see a transplant hospital go up. Every single one.
Probably lots of Americans are desperate because their waiting period is so long in the United States for the organs to receive. But going to China, you just have to think of it, you know. Somebody will be killed on demand.
We can't do anything about the supply of stolen organs, but what we can do is choke off the payment for those organs.
We have to stop CCP that dominating, that, you know, this is innocent people's organs, that we really have to stop it. But I am just so frustrated. We've been known this issue for last 30 years. And we really have to do something more than just hearing here. But the whole world, we have to work together to stop these horrific things.
The movement to oppose the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting continues as more doctors and politicians step up to oppose these crimes against humanity. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Senators held a closed-door briefing yesterday with national security officials to discuss the fate of TikTok.
There is an ongoing effort in Congress to force the sale of the platform currently owned by ByteDance, a company with links to the Chinese regime. Here's more.
Potential to manipulate content.
Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, says it's a national security threat to have the data of roughly 170 million Americans available to an entity controlled by Beijing. Last week, the House passed a bill that called for China-owned ByteDance to sell the app or face a ban in the U.S. Senator Marco Rubio endorses the bill.
Every technology company in China, under Chinese law, has to do whatever the Chinese government tells them to do. That algorithm, in a moment of conflict or on an ongoing basis, can be altered in order to drive certain messages, to divide Americans, to destabilize our politics.
Senate Commerce Committee Chair Maria Cantwell says she is considering holding a public meeting to, quote, get it right, but did not offer a precise timeline. Cantwell said she plans to meet this week with one of the authors of the bill, Mike Gallagher. Gallagher chairs the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok says it spent more than $1.5 billion to protect data and store it within the United States. The company said in a statement the bill would trample on the First Amendment rights of 170 million Americans. The lawmakers say the bill isn't about going after the app itself, but rather to address concerns surrounding its ownership structure. The bill has support from the Biden administration, as well as a large number of Republicans. One voice speaking against the effort comes from former President Trump. Trump previously supported banning TikTok, but recently came out against the bill. On Truth Social, he said a ban on the app would be an opportunity for Facebook to double its business. Trump accuses Facebook of cheating in the last election.
Coming up, a federal appeals court once again blocks the controversial border law in Texas. We'll bring you an update and an explanation of the ongoing back and forth.
New York Attorney General Letitia James opposing former President Trump's request to delay posting a bond. Why she thinks Trump is stalling, that and more with NTD's legal correspondent after the break.
funny expression. There's a little scar right below his neck. The artist, on a trip to somewhere in South America, he met this kid who told him a story about himself. The technique is really good. As you'll see, like in the foreground, there's water on his face. The texture is so realistic, but then sort of in the back, you have these washed out colors, almost a sort of fantasy feel. The whole of the picture is very balanced, and you still get that sense of harmony and warm light from it. The artist, he was really moved by the child's spirit. The child's from the slums, and so he looks around and he sees people who either get into drugs or they get into gangs, and he doesn't want that for himself. So he was telling this artist about how he's going to make a better life for himself. The immense spirit and determination that the kid had really stuck with the guy, so that's why he painted such a large portrait of the child.
Many of us have been child fighters, but this little kid learned to defend himself in his own way. It's a great sacrifice that way. And so this is another form of strength, another form of endurance. We are capable of much more than we think. These children amaze us.
Are you ready to help your family get prepared for the unexpected?
Everyone in? Here we go!
Ladybug and Cat Noir know how important it is to be ready. Because you never know when Hawkmoth is going to strike, or a disaster will hit. And you don't need miraculous powers. Just put those planning skills you already have to good use. Know who to call, decide on a safe meeting location, and create an emergency preparedness kit. Make a plan that will help you and your family be ready when emergencies happen. Ready Kids can help.
I'm coming to save you!
Get started at ready.gov/kids.
Welcome back. The clock is ticking for former President Trump to post bond in New York. Attorney General Letitia James's case.
In a filing yesterday, she said if he doesn't have the cash, he can use his real estate holdings. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has more on that and an update in the Georgia case.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment.
New York Attorney General Letitia James is skeptical of former President Trump's claim that he can't get a $464 million bond. She said in a filing on Wednesday that there are other ways to get the bond. For example, getting more than one bond, by dividing the bond amount among multiple sureties, thereby limiting any individual surety's risk to a smaller sum. Trump and his company need to post a bond for the full amount by next week in order to stop James from seizing his assets. Last month, a New York appellate judge refused to halt the payment while Trump appeals. Now, Trump's asking the appeals court to step in again, this time asking for a delay in posting the bond. In an ABC interview last month, James threatened to take matters into her own hands.
We will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
In the Wednesday filing, she argues it's possible to use real estate holdings as collateral for a bond, and that if surety companies won't accept his assets, it's because his holdings are not nearly as valuable as defendants claim. The appeals court has yet to rule on Trump's latest request, and the clock is ticking.
Is that there are several legal issues to sort through.
In Georgia, Judge Scott McAfee granted Trump's request to appeal his order, which allows District Attorney Fani Willis to continue prosecuting the case. But he says he's not pausing the case. He said he will continue addressing the many other unrelated pretrial motions. In New York, a federal judge won't sanction Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen. Cohen accidentally gave his lawyer fake case citations generated by artificial intelligence. The judge called it embarrassing. But he refused to end Cohen's supervised release. Cohen pleaded guilty in 2018 to campaign finance violations and tax evasion. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And as we move closer to November, President Biden has more than double the money in the bank as former President Trump. Trump, meanwhile, has a slight polling advantage in swing states, which could decide November's election. In February, Biden's campaign said it raised more than $53 million, giving it a total of more than $155 million. Trump, meanwhile, raised $39 million in February, with a total of $74 million. This week, President Biden attended 2 private fundraising events in Texas. Trump's campaign is bogged down by legal fees. Just last month, fundraising group Save America spent more than $5 million on legal fees. And Texas, once again, not allowed to arrest illegal immigrants for now.
There was another reversal in the ongoing battle between the Lone Star State and the Biden administration. Here's the latest on the state's embattled immigration law.
After multiple reversals on this ongoing legal battle, the Supreme Court on Tuesday allowed the Texas law, known as Senate Bill 4, to take effect. The High Court gave jurisdiction over the case back to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Wednesday spoke at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, explaining what happened after the Supreme Court made its decision.
Like watching a tennis match, the ball goes back and forth across the net constantly. Later on last night, the Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals said not so fast.
On Wednesday, the Fifth Circuit heard oral arguments to decide whether they'll lift the temporary stay, but it's unclear if they'll make a decision before April. That's when the appeals court will hear further arguments in the case. The lawyer for Texas argued the judges should allow at least parts of Senate Bill 4 to take effect in the meantime.
Texas has a right to defend itself. And under any plausible reading of that right, at least some applications of SB 4 are constitutional.
The law would allow Texas to arrest and deport illegal immigrants. The judges on Wednesday seem to have more problems with the deportation provision of the bill. And this law would set historic precedent because immigration has always been under the jurisdiction of the federal government, not states. Liberal Supreme Court Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson issued this dissent on Tuesday, saying that law upends the federal-state balance of power that has existed for over a century. But Texas argues the bill mirrors federal law and was put in place to compensate for the Biden administration's lack of border enforcement.
But we finally got a law crafted in a way to be able to withstand legal challenge, be able to withstand the arguments that will be made.
For now, Texas is not allowed to enforce the law, pending the hearing on its constitutionality in April. The Supreme Court could also intervene at any time.
Let's get some insight into the Texas immigration law from Andrew Arthur, a fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies and a former immigration judge. Andrew, this is some dense and tricky legal ping pong going on. Thanks for sorting all this out. Are there merits and flaws to this law as courts have both sided with it and ruled against it?
Yeah, I mean, this really is an unprecedented law that the state of Texas has passed. No state in American history has ever attempted to criminalize illegal entry over a international boundary into that state in the way that Texas has. But it's important to note that the reason that Texas has passed this unprecedented law is because it's dealing with unprecedented policies by the administration. Never before in American history has any administration ever abandoned deterrence as a border policy, which is why so many people are entering the state of Texas now. So yeah, part of the reason why this case is stretching out and has so many permutations is because it's an unprecedented law intended to deal with an unprecedented situation.
And some critics have claimed that President Biden is pushing these open border policies. What are states supposed to do if the federal government doesn't enforce immigration law?
Well, that's an important point because Governor Abbott actually issued a statement in late January in which he said, in essence, that the federal government had breached the covenant that it had reached with Texas when Texas joined the union to protect Texas against illegal immigration. And the next day, 25 other Republican governors issued a statement supporting that statement. So, yeah, this is a real issue. This is a real question. And when you got 26 governors, more than half the governors in the nation, saying that the Biden administration is in essence violating the Constitution by not protecting Texas and in turn protecting them, that really does set up a showdown like this one. This is going back to the Supreme Court for sure.
Yeah, and expanding on our lead into this, the dissenting Supreme Court justices said the order, quote, invites further chaos and crisis in immigration enforcement. Does this law bring about more instances of racial profiling like some immigration advocates claim?
Well, so the way that this law applies is it only criminalizes individuals who enter Texas illegally. The only way that this law would really be applied is if a Texas state trooper or a local cop sees someone coming illegally into the United States. So as written, it wouldn't actually facilitate profiling at all. Anybody who comes out of the river up onto the shore and attempts to enter the United States would be stopped and questioned. And more likely than not, if they don't have any status in the United States, they'd be arrested. So Texas needs to be very careful in the way that it applies this law. In fact, those questions came up during the oral argument yesterday. But the way it's written and the way that I anticipate it's going to be carried out, it wouldn't profile at all. It would simply, apply a rational basis test in the same way that cops apply probable cause and reasonable possibility standards already.
I see what you mean, Andrew. Only someone who is actually in the act of a crime can be arrested here. And that may bring some relief to the 40% Latino population in Texas. Now, what about that so-called Show Me Your Papers law that was passed in Arizona in 2010? There was a lot of backlash. Is Texas headed into a similar situation?
That's actually a great question because the case that you're referring to is Arizona versus United States, 2012 opinion out of the Supreme Court in which the Supreme Court said Arizona didn't have the ability to criminalize the presence of an illegal alien in the state of Arizona because Congress had already legislated in that area and preempted any such legislation. This one is different because, again, it only criminalizes the act of crossing an international boundary into Texas. So this is different both in form and substance to the Arizona law, which is why, again, the courts are struggling with it because there are no landmarks for them to follow in determining whether this law is legal or illegal. And I anticipate the courts are going to take it slowly in actually assessing the legality of this law.
Well, thank you for bringing clarity to this. Andrew Arthur at the Center for Immigration Studies.
Thank you so much for having me.
A major charter bus company has agreed to stop busing illegal immigrants to the New York City area until a civil lawsuit is concluded.
Court records filed yesterday show Roadrunner Charters entered into the agreement with New York.
Roadrunner was one of the bus companies that took part in Texas Governor Greg Abbott's strategy to send migrants to sanctuary cities.
New York City filed the civil lawsuit against 17 bus companies in December, seeking to recoup money spent providing housing and care to the illegal immigrants.
The suit asked at least $708 million total from all the bus companies.
As of December last year, Texas sent more than 33,000 illegal immigrants to New York City since the spring of 2022. That's according to the New York City Mayor's office.
Coming up, President Biden campaigns in the battleground state of Arizona while announcing a big investment into chipmaker Intel. It's part of efforts to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing.
The fourth officer in the so-called Goon Squad case is sentenced. He was handed the harshest sentence so far for the torture of 2 men in Mississippi. Get that story coming up.
funny expression. There's a little scar right below his neck. The artist, on a trip to somewhere in South America, he met this kid who told him a story about himself. The technique is really good. As you'll see, like in the foreground, there's water on his face. The texture is so realistic, but then sort of in the back, you have these washed out colors, almost a sort of fantasy feel. The whole of the picture is very balanced, and you still get that sense of harmony and warm light from it. The artist, he was really moved by the child's spirit. The child's from the slums, and so he looks around and he sees people who either get into drugs or they get into gangs, and he doesn't want that for himself. So he was telling this artist about how he's going to make a better life for himself. The immense spirit and determination that the kid had really stuck with the guy, so that's why he painted such a large portrait of the child.
Many of us have been child fighters. But this little kid learned to defend himself in his own way. It's a great sacrifice that way. And so this is another form of strength, another form of endurance. We are capable of much more than we think. These children amaze us.
When I drink it, the first thing was I feel the warmth in my tummy. It's kind of like gently radiating out, a kind of a very comforting warmth. And it was really good, actually. I felt much better. I did feel, actually, an effect. And I find that it is actually better when I take it regularly.
It's actually steamed and dried 9 times. And so it's really, the essence is really extracted.
Then a second time, I tried it really like on an empty stomach and just 2 teaspoons of it, and over a few times. And wow, that was a big difference, because suddenly I could feel, wow, I was very good energized. I didn't have to eat. I could work outside in the garden for a couple of hours, and I still felt very well. And I was impressed by that. So I think it's a good product.
Good to have you back. President Biden announced yesterday in Arizona an $8.5 billion federal grant for chipmaker Intel.
It's one of the biggest investments in U.S. semiconductor manufacturing from the federal government. Here's the story.
The funding for Intel projects in Arizona and 3 other states will come from the CHIPS and Science Act passed in 2022. The law aims to boost domestic manufacturing of semiconductor chips and reduce America's dependence on Asia for cutting-edge chips. The White House said the money will go towards supporting construction, expansion, and modernization of Intel facilities in Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, and Oregon. Speaking in Chandler, Arizona, Biden said this will create thousands of new jobs.
Today's investment helps all Americans in red states and blue states, all across America, urban, rural, suburban, and tribal communities.
The president spoke about his efforts to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. while taking a swipe at former President Trump.
On his watch, companies sent American jobs overseas for cheaper labor and imported products. We're creating jobs in America and exporting American products.
But there could be concerns as the money starts flowing later this year. Chip manufacturing is a water-intensive activity. It takes a lot of water to cool down machinery and rinse silicon, water that in Arizona is a scarce commodity. An S&P Global Ratings report placed water scarcity as a risk in the coming decade for the tech hardware industry. Intel also says they are facing several delays. In Ohio, the company said they would not be able to meet their 2025 goal of completing 2 new chip plants, and so they wouldn't be until 2027 or 2028.
A quarter of all Americans hold unfavorable views of both President Biden and former President Trump.
That's according to a new survey by the Pew Research Center.
The report reveals that adults aged 18 to 29 were more likely to favor neither candidate.
The report also shows how Biden and Trump's favorability has changed over time. Biden's favorability ratings changed little over the last year, but they are lower now than in 2022. And the shift has been largely from within the Democratic Party. Trump is viewed less negatively than in 2023. Republicans' views on the former president appear to have grown more positive.
A demographic of interest is Hispanic adults. Biden's favorability among Hispanics has dropped by 17 points since 2022, while Trump's favorability has grown.
Biden has been campaigning for the Latino vote in Arizona and Nevada. Both swing states have a large Hispanic population. Robocalls, powered by artificial intelligence. They have already appeared in American elections, with the fake robocall impersonating President Biden recently in New Hampshire. What are the risks of these deceptive tools? What are they capable of? And how can the public be protected? I asked this to Robert Salvador, an AI expert and CEO of DigiBuild. Here's what he told me.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're getting to the era of artificial intelligence where you can't tell if something is real or fake, if someone actually made a video themselves, or if it's artificial intelligence, one of these deep fakes or one of these robocalls. And it's going to impact elections significantly. You're already seeing some happen with President Biden in New Hampshire. Donald Trump has mentioned that there may be images out there that are fake of him. So it's definitely going to be something that is very important in elections going forward, because we're getting to the place where you can create content that you can't tell if it's real or fake. And if you think about the implications of what could happen if you have a presidential deep fake or, something like that in government, it could really impact, elections and politics around the world. So I think it's important more people talk about this like we're doing here.
Yeah, it's very misleading. And that Democratic operative, he actually said that he was just trying to bring awareness to this when he created that fake robocall in the New Hampshire primary. What can these robocalls do? Can they actually have a back and forth conversation with you?
Sure. So it depends on the technology. There's a bunch of different things you could do. There's technology where a live person can have their voice changed or even their image changed, where it seems like, yes, you could have a back and forth conversation. There's a pretty famous deep fake out there about Tom Cruise, the actor, when he's golfing, and it just changed from a regular person to Tom Cruise right in front of your eyes. There's other types where the AI can just kind of give a message, a pre-recorded message. There's conversation that can happen, but it's not as back and forth quite yet. It's still a little bit early for some of those tools, but we will get to the point where, yes, back and forth conversations with AI can happen.
That is just so deceptive. It's really crazy learning about what these things can do. And President Biden, in his State of the Union address, he said, harness the promise of AI and protect us from its peril, ban AI voice impersonation, and more. Are there any laws that can be put in place to protect people from being at risk of these robocalls that aren't already on the books?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there's things you can do with the technology to reduce that risk. Anytime you're using software or something like that, there's ways to make sure that the software isn't used for nefarious purposes. There are things that you could do at the state and federal level. I personally just, what we've seen with government lately is anytime they take power for something, even if it's a good reason, they never get it back or give it back. So I'm worried that if you start doing too much regulation of AI, you'll have the same problem you have with big tech right now, where only one, part of the government has it and they censor people and they only use it for their purposes. So what I think will happen is the free market will create solutions that allow us to use AI in a, positive and impactful way, while hopefully stopping some of the, again, nefarious things that can happen. I think the biggest thing we can do is just make people aware of this technology, that it exists, encourage people to do their own research, to not jump at a headline or at, one piece of content before they actually understand what's going on behind it. So if anything, I think as a nation, we need to prepare for this because it's going to be everywhere. And I'm just not sure if government regulation can really even do anything about it. It's like trying to regulate the internet. It's such a big place that it'll never happen. The best we can do is prepare the voters and the citizens in the U.S. to identify, recognize, and make their own assumptions when it comes to deepfakes and AI and things like that.
Public awareness is key here. Robert Salvador, CEO of DigiBuild, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Several California lawmakers proposing legislation in response to anti-Semitic incidents. The bill aims to keep students safe while ensuring free speech protections. California State Senator Scott Wiener discusses the measure.
Jewish students are being specifically targeted here and being bullied and intimidated and harassed and sometimes attacked so that they are not able to congregate, associate, learn, be who they are, and that has to stop.
The Senate bill would require college campuses to update and enforce rules surrounding protests. It would also prohibit calls for genocide and any violence or harassment that impedes free speech. The proposed legislation comes after Jewish students at UC Santa Barbara were targeted by anti-Semitic messages during a class. An event at the school involving a former Israeli soldier was also canceled after a crowd of protesters surrounded the building.
A fourth officer from a Mississippi county's so-called goon squad was sentenced to 40 years in prison yesterday for torturing 2 black men last year.
Christian Dedman received the harshest sentence so far.
Meanwhile, his co-defendant, Daniel Updike, received 17 years in prison, along with mental health treatment and drug and alcohol treatment. Updike must also pay almost $80,000 in restitution to the 2 men, Eddie Parker and Michael Jenkins.
The 2 former deputies were among 6 former officers who pleaded guilty last year to federal charges stemming from their warrantless raid and torture of Parker and Jenkins.
Updike apologized to the 2 men during Wednesday's hearing and asked them for forgiveness. A sheriff's report released yesterday says shipping industry CEO Angela Chao was intoxicated when she drove into a pond and died last month in Texas.
The sheriff's office says Chao's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the state's legal limit and called her death an unfortunate accident.
Chao was sister-in-law to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. She died after having dinner with a large group at a ranch west of Austin.
The report describes a frantic scene as friends and deputies tried to pull Chao from her Tesla after she backed it into a pond on the property.
The report says Chao called her friend and said she was trapped inside her car in the water. The conversation lasted 8 minutes as the car slowly sank.
Emergency crews pulled Chao out of the car and brought her to shore, where she was pronounced dead. She is survived by her husband, father, and 4 sisters. Coming up, Federal Reserve officials signaled yesterday they still expect to cut their key interest rate 3 times in 2024, fueling a rally on Wall Street. Stay tuned.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。 所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
All right, I'm at the house, and I'm gonna head inside. Okay, come on, this door. I'm in the house.
What do you see?
Let me check the den. There's nothing in the den. Let me check the kitchen. There's no one downstairs, it looks like.
Wait, what was that?
I don't know. Let me head upstairs.
What do you see?
What the? Did you shut this bathroom door?
No.
Oh,
What?
It's not here.
What do you mean?
The gun's not here.
What? Where is it?
Oh my God.
What's going on?
Cam.
Oh my God, what's going
Cameron, are you in there? Open the door. Cam, please, please, open the door, Cameron. Come on, Cam.
Thanks for staying with us. And we have with us now NTD business host Don Ma to give us the latest updates from the financial world.
Don, let's start with the Fed. What can you tell us?
Okay, so yeah, I'll start with the Fed, and then if we have time as well, I like to mention something about gold prices and Apple. A lot of trouble heading Apple's way, actually. But yeah, the Federal Reserve meeting yesterday, very important, and then their decision as well, something that is very closely watched. So to start off, the Federal Reserve held its key interest rate steady yesterday. Now this is for the 5th consecutive meeting. So what that means is no hikes and at the same time, no cuts either. So speaking at the conference, Chair Jerome Powell said that the surprising pickup in inflation in January and February hadn't really fundamentally changed the Fed's picture of the economy, meaning that the central bank still expects inflation to continue to cool, though probably more gradually than it previously thought 3 months ago. So now in terms of rate cuts, Powell said his instinct is that rates will not go back down to the levels that were super low before the pandemic. And there's a tremendous uncertainty that about where the long-term rate will ultimately stand, but nevertheless, Fed policymakers indicated they still expect to reduce rates 3 times by the end of 2024. But here's why actually rate cuts are so anticipated right now. So they would over time lead to lower costs for home and auto loans, credit card borrowing, and business loans. Creates an easier financial environment for companies, meaning higher profit margins, and stock markets will also benefit from this as well. So think about 401ks, right? So that's why everyone is looking forward to seeing rate cuts.
Right, and it makes sense, right? Because if you remember why the Fed cut the rates in the first place, to slow economy, discourage spending. Also, you just mentioned there will be, we do anticipate more rate cuts around 3 times. So what was the market's reaction to all of these news?
Yeah, so Wall Street, the main stock indexes closed higher on Wednesday because it seems like the Federal Reserve eased investor fears by saying that borrowing costs and being unchanged, and at the same time reinforcing that expectations of rate cuts could be as many as 3 this year. So that eased some fears for investors. Investors weren't actually expecting any surprises yesterday, and markets had long priced in no rate moves for the March meeting. And the market was relieved that the Fed is still projecting at least 3/4 of a percentage point rate cuts this year. But as well, recent too hot inflation readings have not derailed the Fed's plan so far, and that was actually consistent with market expectations. S&P 500 turned up 0.65%. Now, this is only marginally positive because, like I said, it was mostly priced in what the Fed was going to say.
Yeah, and Powell said again that he's going to probably cut rates this year, but they just need a little more confirmation that inflation is going to hit their 2% mark. How is this all affecting the price of gold, Don?
Yeah, so we're seeing some movements there. The rise in gold prices continues After hitting an all-time high today, the prices may continue to increase as central banks continue to buy gold in record amounts, and prices could rise to $2,300 per ounce in the second half of 2024. So gold is currently trading for just over $2,200 per ounce, and expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve may cut rates in the second half of 2024 could also fuel a continued rally in gold prices. And this is because gold prices usually have an inverse relationship with interest rates. So as interest rates dive, gold becomes more appealing compared to fixed income assets like bonds, yielding smaller returns in a low interest rate environment. Now, physical demand for gold is also fueled by its appeal as a safe haven asset amid geopolitical uncertainties.
Right, definitely sounds like good news that for people that bought gold before this rally, and I did hear that this year they would hit some record level prices. So also you brought some news about Apple. You said they have some trouble headed their way.
Yeah, it seems like not just a little bit of trouble, but so according to Bloomberg News, the U.S. Department of Justice is poised to sue Apple as soon as today, actually. And this is for allegedly violating antitrust laws by blocking rivals from accessing hardware and software features of its iPhone. So the suit is expected to be filed in federal court, and the case actually marks the third time the DOJ has sued Apple for antitrust violations in the past 14 years. But this case is actually a first in that it's accusing the iPhone maker of illegally maintaining its dominant position. But like I said, not just a little bit of trouble. It's not the only thing. Apple is also in the midst of an antitrust-related confrontation with Fortnite games maker Epic Games. And earlier yesterday, Meta Platforms, Microsoft, Elon Musk's X, and Match also joined Epic Games' protest that Apple has failed to honor a court-ordered injunction, which is governing payments in its App Store. So seems like a whole lot on Apple's plate right now.
Sure.
Yeah, and Apple already lost 1% in their stock value. So
yeah, and don't forget Europe. They just were sentenced to 1.8 billion euros there too. So a lot going on.
Yeah.
All right.
Ma, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
And stay with us. Cherry blossoms blooming in the nation's capital, but they won't be around for long. Some of those trees will soon say goodbye. That and more when we return.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Lord Heavenly Father, I pray to you today to guide us tomorrow. Give us strength as we face death. Help us not to be afraid, as we know that we are going to be coming to your kingdom.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand what that energy, what that message is, and they're drawn to it because everybody kind of needs a little bit of that in their own life, of, you know, the steadfast calmness and something to hold on to. It's definitely an inner peace in the midst of something very chaotic, and for a lot of people right now, the whole world is very, very chaotic. So I guess that's another reason why so many people are very drawn to this.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Welcome back. If you take a walk around the tidal basin in Washington, D.C., you'll find blooming cherry blossoms at the backdrop of the nation's capital.
But enjoy it while they last, because some of those trees will soon be replaced. NTD's Sam Wong has the details.
It's a signal of springtime. Around this time of year, DC residents and tourists flock to the tidal basin just to get a glimpse of the blooming cherry blossoms.
Well, we just want to see the beautiful cherry blossoms in bloom.
We've been doing it for 20 plus years.
Then there's Stumpy, seemingly decrepit, but certainly not lifeless. Humbly standing alone, the scraggly stump has become a beloved online sensation and a symbol of resilience in the face of challenges and hardships. But as tourists came to pay their respect this year, Stumpy is quietly saying goodbye.
All of the trees that are scheduled for removal, including Stumpy, will be turned to mulch. Perhaps not glamorous, but it is the cycle of life in the forestry community.
Starting in May, the National Park Service will embark on a rehabilitation project around the tidal basin. Some 140 cherry trees by the river will have to be removed. Officials said the seawalls are sinking, letting the high tides on the shore twice every day. This leads to trees being destroyed by brackish water.
Just barely the edge of the bark still there. The insides are just decimated. It's so sad.
Nothing lives forever. And the good thing about this decision that they're going to take down Stumpy is it's brought even more people out to see.
Here at the tidal basin, there's a walkway along the river, and as you can see, it is now covered with debris and sediments. This just goes to show how far up on the shore the water has reached. To address the flooding issue, the National Park Service said a construction on the seawall is happening soon.
The walls were not properly built in the late 19th century. Sea level rise of a foot, settlement of 5 feet, and we've now got water that's coming in 6 feet above the walls that are designed to protect them.
After the reconstruction project, about 275 new cherry trees will be planted. This year's warm weather has pushed cherry trees to bloom ahead of schedule. The peak bloom started on Sunday, making it the second earliest on record. If you want to catch a glimpse of DC's cherry blossom this year, be sure to check them out this week while they're still around. Reporting from Tidal Basin, Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
Yeah, check them out, especially Stumpy, because he won't be there any longer.
Oh yeah, maybe they need a little memorial for Stumpy.
I know, right? He's become such a legend.
Yeah, I bet it smells great out there too.
Oh, for sure. If only we had Smell TV once again. Smell-o-vision, you called it?
Yeah.
All right. We're heading to a quick break, but we'll be right back, so stay tuned.
NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around the world. Expert analysis, investigative reporting, and original award-winning documentaries. We're known for our uncensored China coverage you won't find anywhere else. We cover the stories that affect you and shape our world without the political noise. We report from the heart with you in mind. Watch us right here on NTD News.
Good morning. Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Here are today's top stories. Former President Trump's legal team taking aim at the rejection of presidential immunity in his election case, saying they found a fatal defect in the argument. Legal analysis on what they say is singling Trump out.
House investigators plan to call President Biden to testify at an impeachment inquiry hearing. We have takeaways from testimony of Hunter Biden's former business associates and the White House reaction.
President Biden canceling another round of student loan totaling about $6 billion. Find out which group qualified this time.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken travels to Saudi Arabia and Egypt to work on a ceasefire plan. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addresses Republican senators.
A Texas immigration law is blocked again by a federal appeals court just hours after the Supreme Court cleared the way for it to be enforced. We take a look at the legal back and forth with a former immigration judge.
Think you have the right stuff to become an astronaut for NASA? They're accepting applications. Here's some of the requirements for applicants.
This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters, here are Evelyn Lee and Kevin Hogan.
Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, March 21st. This morning, lawmakers unveiled a $1.2 trillion government funding package. This as the government shutdown deadline approaches at the end of the week. The release of the bill text has increased the urgency for both the House and Senate to push the package through.
A number of critical government operations need to be funded by this Friday, including the Departments of Defense, Homeland Security, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, State, and the legislative branch.
Congress passed 6 bills earlier this month to fund some government agencies for the rest of the fiscal year. Now it's finally on the verge of completing the annual appropriations package.
And the battle rages over whether former President Trump should be granted immunity in his election case. His legal team says they have found a fatal defect in the D.C. appeals court ruling that it rejected it. And they said the ruling created an unconstitutional exception to immunity, and that only applies to this one case. The team points to this exception, saying the court rejected immunity because Trump's actions were improper because he was motivated by a desire to stay in office. And Trump's team says this would drag federal courts into other legal battles because nearly everything a president does, whether it's an alleged crime or not, is motivated by their wish to stay in office. And here for analysis on this big question as to whether Trump's immunity claim was fairly rejected is Gerard Felitti, a civil and human rights attorney and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Gerard, thank you for your time this morning. Why does it matter that Trump was motivated by a desire to stay in office? Is that relevant to immunity?
What the courts seem to be saying is, and first of all, this is an issue of first impression. This is something that the courts have not considered before, in the context in which a former president can be immune or not immune for prosecution for acts committed while in office. So we don't have any rules to play by. We are going to assess this as a first impression. And what the court seems to be saying is that there's a difference between an official act that the president does and something that he does in his private capacity as a person who has the desire to remain in office, and that while immunity would likely apply to official acts done in a ministerial capacity as president, acts that are done out of a desire to stay in office out of private motives may be exempt from immunity, may be prosecutable. And that's the distinction. That is what the court is looking at, is whether what he did, whether what Donald Trump did in November after the election was out of a desire to stay in office, or whether he was executing the office of president.
That's right. Let's see if we can get the signal back here. If Gerard's still with us. Gerard, if you're here, okay, you are still here. Yes, and the Trump's team was basically saying that they're singling Trump out here, making Trump not immune, but other presidents immune if they go ahead with this. In relation to this immunity question, what role does motivation play in the law? It's all on its own, or how does it affect it when they consider the actions and the circumstances around the situation?
Well, because this is something that we've never seen before, no case like this has been heard before, we don't really know the role of motivation in this. Motivation is a factor that will help a court in determining whether what Donald Trump did was in a private capacity out of a desire to remain in office, or whether he did so with the intent to uphold the election laws and the integrity of the election. But the other question is, who gets to decide whether what Donald Trump did was as a private citizen or as president? There's no groundwork for this. So we don't know really whether it's a court that makes that decision or a jury, a finder of fact. And because we don't know, that's an additional issue that Donald Trump needs to put up for appeal, because here the appeals court made that determination, but maybe it's within the province of a jury to decide, not for the court to say.
Definitely, this is some legal pioneering going on. And even if there was a flaw in the D.C. court's ruling rejecting immunity over his desire to remain in office, would that necessarily mean that the Supreme Court should grant immunity, or would they have other factors to consider?
The Supreme Court would have other factors as well. They would look at what has happened in comparable cases with court justices, for example, or what happened with Richard Nixon after he left office. So just that this is a fatal flaw in the appellate court's ruling does not mean that the Supreme Court can't come to the same conclusion in another way, or the Supreme Court won't consider other factors as well. It is a bad thing that apparently that the appeals court did in its determination according to Donald Trump, but that does not mean that the Supreme Court will automatically reach the same decision. The Supreme Court will look at all of the issues that are raised on appeal and decide for itself.
A little more time here. Gerard, can you give us an overview of what's really happening to former President Trump? Some have said that no one is above the law, whereas his sons are saying that this is a banana republic style prosecution.
Well, ultimately, it can be seen in two ways. It can be seen, and it is being seen by the people who are prosecuting Donald Trump, as an illegal attempt to stay in office. And it's being seen by Trump supporters as he was doing what he was legally entitled to do to maintain the integrity of the election and make sure that the votes were properly counted. Now, this has become highly politicized, and we see that you can make these charges, that Donald Trump will have to defend against these charges, at the very least in the Georgia courtroom. But what actually happened is up for interpretation. You really can argue both sides of this. And because you can, the reason Trump's team is arguing that this is political and not happening to other people is quite simply because other people have not been prosecuted for similar election claims before. And we have also seen a difference between how the Justice Department has handled Donald Trump and his team for prosecution versus other elected officials in the past, or candidates like Hillary Clinton, like Barack Obama, like other issues that have come up. So that points to the Republicans saying that prosecutions are unfair, but ultimately the facts need to come out, and a judge and a jury will decide what happened.
Well, thank you for helping us sort through all this. Gerard Ferliti, civil and human rights attorney and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project.
Thank you.
President Biden announced today his administration is canceling another $6 billion in student loans.
The latest group includes 78,000 public service workers, including teachers, nurses, firefighters, and more.
This group qualifies under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program created in 2007 to forgive student debt for those going into public service.
The latest move brings the Biden administration's total student debt cancellation to $144 billion for about 4 million Americans.
An additional 380,000 borrowers who may be eligible for debt relief within the next 1 or 2 years will also be getting emails from Biden.
Biden is seeking re-election in November and needs the youth vote to help him win. Critics have accused the president of trying to buy votes with debt cancellation.
A House panel investigating allegations of influence peddling is planning to invite President Biden to testify as it winds up its probe.
House Oversight Chair James Comer says Americans need to hear from the president himself. He says that way President Biden can explain why his family received tens of millions of dollars from foreign companies with his assistance. 2 of Hunter Biden's former business associates testified yesterday. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has takeaways from the hearing and the White House response.
Let the record show that the witnesses...
Hunter Biden's former business associates Tony Bobolinsky and Jason Galanis testified Wednesday as part of the House impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Both said Joe Biden had been involved in their past business dealings. Galanis is serving a 15-year sentence on fraud charges and testified from prison. He says the aim was to make billions using the Biden family name in foreign business dealings. He testified Hunter Biden put his then Vice President father on speakerphone with a Russian oligarch and her husband in 2014 and leveraged the family name with Chinese businessman Henry Chao. He testified Chao, chairman of Chinese Communist Party-linked Harvest Fund Management, was seeking partnership to gain political access in the U.S. and around the world. Galanis says prosecutors were uninterested in evidence he had of Hunter Biden's crimes and believes the reason was political.
I believe I've been a victim of a pattern of retribution by the Department of Justice. I believe I'm putting myself at grave risk within the BOP for providing information on these matters concerning the president and his son.
Galanis also testified he was sexually abused by a member of the prison staff at FPC Pensacola last year.
He persisted in sexually harassing me for many months thereafter. I had hoped to receive home confinement, which would remove me from danger.
Bobulinski started off by accusing Representatives Jamie Raskin and Dan Goldman of lying.
We keep hearing from certain corners that our democracy is at risk and democracy is on the ballot in 24. Yet the same people preaching this mantra know better. They continue to lie directly to the American people without hesitation and remorse.
He alleged Hunter Biden and James Biden had perjured themselves during deposition. Democrats called convicted businessman Lev Parnas to testify, an associate of Rudy Giuliani.
I will invite President Biden.
House Oversight Chair James Comer says he will invite President Biden to testify in the coming days. He's also considering ethics-related bills to target influence peddling or foreign lobbying among officials. The panel will issue a final report with recommendations once the inquiry has concluded. The White House says Republicans need to move on and focus on other issues. White House spokesman Ian Sams called it a sad stunt and told Comer to call it a day, pal. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Next up, Secretary of State Antony Blinken travels to Saudi Arabia and Egypt to work on a ceasefire plan. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu discusses the planned invasion of Rafah.
A Texas immigration law is blocked again by a federal appeals court just hours after the Supreme Court cleared the way for its enforcement. We take a look at the legal back and forth with a former immigration judge.
NASA is accepting applications for its astronaut program. Think you've got the right stuff? Find out some of their requirements when we come back.
Stay tuned to get 2 rolls of alien tape free. You wouldn't stick your mother-in-law on the wall, but you could with alien tape. It just sticks. Just peel and stick to make anything stay in place quick. Brick, pavers, marble, tile, plastic, even leather. Nothing works better than alien tape. You wouldn't stick your fishbowl on a moving car, but you could with alien tape. The secret is nano-stick technology that grabs and locks on to secure one side of the surface to the other. Alien tape secures in seconds, then twist, pull, and rinse to reuse. Call or go online to get your first roll of alien tape for just $19.99, plus shipping and processing. But to make this deal really stick, we'll give you 2 more rolls absolutely free. You get 3 rolls of alien tape for one low price. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-490-1364 or go to tryalientape.com. So call 1-800-490-1364 or order online at tryalientape.com.
A performance that truly matters. For each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. Shen Yun. Coming to Lincoln Center, April 3rd through the 14th. Buy tickets now at shenyun.com.
What was the process of actually putting this all together?
Many hours of finding the right camera angles and watching it. The first trouble started just after 1 o'clock.
45 pages, here it is right here. Donald Trump has been indicted.
Somber day for the country.
This all happened before President Trump's speech was over.
The founder of the Oath Keepers militia group is headed to prison for more than 18 years.
His lawyers didn't have this video. The video we're watching right now, his own lawyers did not have. There was a big question of what did the people do who who actually did enter the building.
This is where we picked it up with the security footage that is new. At this point, the story dramatically changes.
The New Jersey man who assaulted a Capitol police officer on January 6th has been sentenced.
So this was withheld.
This was not shown to the defense.
That could be considered exculpatory evidence. This doesn't seem like what a lot of the media is showing.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is. What we're after is the truth.
Good morning again, and good to have you with us. The Israeli military reported today that it killed more than 50 Palestinian terrorists during the past day's fighting around Shifa Hospital in the Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire in Gaza continue. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the port city of Jeddah on Wednesday. The two discussed efforts to reach a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. On Thursday, Blinken is scheduled to meet in Cairo with the foreign ministers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Jordan, as well as a top official from the UAE and a Palestinian representative. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed Republican senators on Wednesday by video link. The address by Netanyahu comes nearly a week after Senate leader Chuck Schumer gave a speech branding the Israeli leader an obstacle to peace.
Chuck Schumer's attacks on Netanyahu and the government of Israel is an attack upon a democracy.
Netanyahu has rebuffed a plea from President Biden to call off plans for a ground assault of Rafah, a city on the southern edge of Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister gave a televised address on Wednesday that preparations were underway for the invasion of the city.
I want you to know that I have already approved the IDF's operational plan, and soon we will also approve the plan to evacuate the civilian population from the battle zones.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says he is considering inviting Netanyahu to address Congress.
I think it's very important for us to show solidarity and support with Israel right now in their time of great struggle.
An invitation to address a joint session of Congress would require buy-in from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
More Americans evacuated Haiti yesterday as the country sinks into chaos, rampant gang violence, and political instability.
Florida's Department of Emergency Management evacuated 14 Florida residents, chartering a plane to fly them to Orlando.
Governor Ron DeSantis says it will likely be the first of many flights to evacuate Florida residents. He says teams in Haiti are on the ground helping people get to departure points safely.
Officials say around 360 Floridians are still in Haiti. The State Department says around 1,600 Americans have reached out from Haiti to explore options.
A State Department spokesman said the U.S. is organizing government-chartered helicopter flights to evacuate Americans.
Armed gangs have been stepping up attacks on government infrastructure, including police stations. Gangs have choked off the food, fuel, and water supplies and blocked the city's port and roads. Many residents are sheltering in their homes. Texas, once again, not allowed to arrest illegal immigrants for now. There was another reversal in the ongoing battle between the Lone Star State and the Biden administration. What are states supposed to do if the federal government doesn't enforce immigration law? Earlier, I spoke with Andrew Arthur, a former immigration judge. Here's what he said.
This really is an unprecedented law that the state of Texas has passed. No state in American history has ever attempted to criminalize illegal entry over a international boundary into that state in the way that Texas has. But it's important to note that the reason that Texas has passed this unprecedented law is because it's dealing with unprecedented policies by the administration. Never before in American history has any administration ever abandoned deterrence as a border policy, which is why so many people are entering the state of Texas now. So yeah, part of the reason why this case is stretching out and has so many permutations is because it's an unprecedented law intended to deal with an unprecedented situation.
Now, what about that so-called Show Me Your Papers law that was passed in Arizona in 2010? There was a lot of backlash. Is Texas headed into a similar situation?
That's actually a great question, because the case that you're referring to is Arizona versus United States, 2012 opinion out of the Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court said Arizona didn't have the ability to criminalize the presence of an illegal alien in the state of Arizona because Congress had already legislated in that area and preempted any such legislation. This one is different because, again, it only criminalizes the act of crossing an international boundary into Texas. So this is different both in form and substance to the Arizona law, which is why, again, the courts are struggling with it, because there are no landmarks for them to follow in determining whether this law is legal or illegal. And I anticipate the courts are going to take it slowly in actually assessing the legality of this law.
Well, thank you for bringing clarity to this. Andrew Arthur at the Center for Immigration Studies.
Thank you so much for having me.
A major charter bus company has agreed to stop busing illegal immigrants to the New York City area until a civil lawsuit is concluded.
Court records filed yesterday show Roadrunner Charters entered into the agreement with New York.
Roadrunner was one of the bus companies that took part in Texas Governor Greg Abbott's strategy to send migrants to sanctuary cities.
New York City filed the civil lawsuit against 17 bus companies in December, seeking to recoup money spent providing housing and care to the illegal immigrants.
The suit asked at least $708 million total from all the bus companies.
As of December last year, Texas sent more than 33,000 illegal immigrants to New York City since the spring of 2022. That's according to the New York City Mayor's office.
Also, trash floating around the Earth's orbit is becoming a growing problem.
A new company called Astroscale has a solution to catch old satellites and other space junk. Let's take a look at what may be the future of space trash removal.
The UK company aims to solve a decades-long problem that's getting worse. At stake are billions of dollars in assets. This includes orbital devices crucial to navigation and smartphone maps, text messaging, calls, and internet connections used by people globally.
Space debris is a big problem for all of us on Earth. Basically, since the start of the space age in 1957, we've had a throwaway culture in space. We've put lots of objects in space, and we've basically not removed them. We've not recycled them or done anything else.
The sheer size of the problem is quite surprising.
So there's 10,000 tons of debris in space, near 40,000 objects, all floating around in different orbits.
The possible dangers to people in orbit is even more concerning.
Another big risk is human risk. We have quite a few astronauts in orbit now. There's going to be more commercial space stations planned over the next few years.
How does the process of removing space junk work?
We're using a robot arm to capture the space object in question and then bring it close and then bring it down to a lower orbit and then release it so it can burn up in the atmosphere. And we've removed that debris object then.
Nick Shave expects the technology to be ready to go in 2 or 3 years. Astroscale is also looking at refueling satellites while they're still in space. Now, when a satellite runs out of fuel, its mission is over. But the company is trying to change that with the Cosmic Service or Spacecraft project. It would be able to refuel satellites and give them a new lease on life.
10 tons of trash, and then we have, I think apparently it burns up or something, but then usually there are just, I think at the beginning of this month, there were 3 tons of trash from the space just, coming to Earth in an unguided entry.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's dangerous too if it does manage to make impact. Well, and cleaning up the space is really important, but there's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch that's about the size of Texas that's just floating around in the Pacific Ocean. They need to clean that up too.
That too. Anyway, where to start? All right, but for now we're staying in space, because if you think you've got the right stuff to become an astronaut, do you?
Well, this could be your chance. NASA is accepting applications for astronauts.
But there's a long list of requirements. You must have a master's degree in a STEM field, meaning science, technology, engineering, or math, from an accredited institution, I should say. Applicants need at least 3 years of related professional experience and the ability to successfully complete NASA's long-duration flight physical.
Selected astronauts will join NASA's Artemis program, which is preparing to land people on the moon. They'll explore and conduct experiments at the lunar South Pole, where humans have never been. There are also future plans to travel to Mars.
Wow.
The red planet.
Yeah.
A lot of sights to see.
There's tons of perks in getting this job, but they were saying extensive travel required. Who would have thought? And no remote work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's some places on Earth that kind of look a little far out with all that geography.
Right. All right, on this here, we will end our show right now, but be sure to stay tuned for NTD's New Today broadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern Time that's coming up. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.